So I want to just start the first video in this series giving you just a little background of how I discovered the science to compliance. And this first started when I went to an alternative school, transitioning from public school as a special education teacher. And I consider myself a very good classroom management teacher because I was very strict, I was very firm. Students listened to what I told them. I was probably a little too strict. And in a public school setting with special education students at the time, I was a middle school English teacher. That worked well for me. However, I tried to use those same techniques the following year in an alternative setting with students that had emotional disturbances, with students that had conduct disorder, ADHD, oppositional defiant. Probably 90% of my students were medicated. I tried that with them, and where I was successful in one setting, immediately I learned that approach was not going to work. I had to have a better balance on fair, firm, but yet being able to show compassion and empathy, and also the appropriate timing for techniques. I wasn't always using the appropriate timing, and so what would happen is that I would have students that would literally run out of my classroom. Students that would literally attack me. Students that let me know very quickly that I had to adjust my approach. So what I would do is I would call upon the resource specialists for assistance because they helped to de-escalate students. They were trained in that. They were very good at it. And so after watching them and other people in the building, I got acculturated into the culture of that alternative school. And instinctively, I just learned a lot of things to do. In addition to learning how to teach social skills, heading the PBIS committee, doing all sorts of things, and just the interactions with students became a lot better. However, I could not scientifically explain to you exactly what I was doing. I was learning by trial and error, and just based upon the feedback I was getting from students and teachers and staff, clinical staff, more experienced than myself. And so it wasn't until several years later when I transitioned to an elementary school where I had autistic students for the first time, I was introduced to something called applied behavior analysis. And I learned a lot of the strategies and techniques of reinforcement, of sequentially doing things, meeting students where they are, replacement behaviors, a lot of the tried and true behavior science strategies that many people lose sight of or just think it's old school. But when you apply it in a modern setting in the appropriate way, it's really effective. So I learned about that, and my hunger for that grew. And so I started attending, in addition to ABA strategy sessions and professional development, I started doing a lot of different classroom management trainings as well. Some of them were good, some of them were horrible. But all in all, I applied things and learned what worked, what didn't work, started using my own style. And then eventually, I started teaching other teachers a lot of the things that I was learning. I started presenting in conferences all over the country, all over my state. And then I started applying these techniques in my own classroom. And one particular year, this is probably my best year of teaching because I taught my students 9 months of curriculum. These are SPED students now. This is now 5th grade, this particular year. 9 months of curriculum I taught my students in 4 months time period. And the reason why is because I devoted the first entire month to strictly teaching them in a scientific fashion the behaviors that would enable them to be successful in my classroom, the behaviors that would enable them to learn properly. And these were both team-taught students and self-contained students. I was running groups all day. and focus strictly on the behavior, strictly on consequences that were what I like to call differentiated consequences. That means you customize consequences to the student, things that they will care about. Because I'm getting ahead of myself, but you think that you're punishing a student and you're actually rewarding them if you don't differentiate the consequences. But we'll get into that later. I'm getting a little ahead of myself. So fast forward several months, now I'm promoted by my school system to behavior specialist, where I'm supporting several schools. And when you're supporting several schools and several teachers, you have the luxury of gaining insight greater than your own experience. Even though prior to this I taught elementary, middle, and high school, this particular year I was supporting administrators and teachers in all different grades that I hadn't taught before in elementary, middle, and high school. And so while I was able to support a lot of teachers, I was only one person. And so I had to give them strategies and help them develop plans that would work while I was supporting other schools. Because it was great while I was coaching them one-on-one. But when I was gone, they needed to have something that was going to sustain them. So I enrolled in an applied behavior analysis graduate program. I wanted to sharpen my skills. I got involved in the cohort. I had a supervisor that would supervise a lot of my cases. We would brainstorm. I would bring a lot of situations to the group and the cohort, and began refining what I'm introducing to you as the science of compliance. The science of getting compliance to your first command so you don't have to repeat yourself over and over again. And there are foundational principles, and we're going to go over some of those in the next video. But as I started refining this, I started getting a lot of requests, not only from within my school system, but outside of my school system. And being as that I supported so many schools, I didn't have the time to fulfill all of these requests. So what I committed to was that I was going to develop a process, and I was going to put this process into a course and put it online so that anyone could access this. And this is how the website defiance2compliance.com was developed, because for at least 3 years I started honing in and developing this science to share with anyone in a very practical, easy to use method. And so that's how Defiance to Compliance came about, was from supporting teachers, administrators, seeing great success, seeing that within a short time period they were able to turn student behaviors around. And these teachers that were getting ready to leave their classroom, getting ready to walk out and quit, a lot of these teachers became superstars, and within like 30 days and less sometimes were able to turn the most challenging student behaviors in the school around. These are students that were getting ready to be transferred to another placement, another school, alternative school, and were able to make it successful in their current base school. So I thought to myself, it's not fair that teachers do not have access to behavior specialists like my school system does. I thought, man, I wish I would have had this earlier in my years of teaching, and I think every school system should have this. So what is the next best thing? Well, the next best thing is making this available to you, making these things that I shared with administrators and teachers where they experienced great success. I want to make this available to you because I think everybody should have it. And so that's where this whole website, these videos that you see, the content on the website came about, is because I want you to benefit from the science of compliance, because too many teachers who have great potential are walking out because these behavior skills that at one time only the special educators had, these special thought to be magical skills, every teacher needs these skills now. Because what we're starting to notice, even in my realm as a behavior specialist, is we're getting a lot more requests from general education students and special education students as well. But we're seeing a lot more behaviors that we thought were reserved for special ed students. We're seeing them in mainstream classrooms. and a lot of teachers have not been adequately prepared. And so we have to come up with ways and develop avenues and platforms where you can access the skills and strategies that are going to help you survive in this field. So I just wanted to let you know where I was coming from, how this was developed, why it was developed, and I hope you really take opportunity to access all of these things that are here for you. So I'll see you in the next video, which is how to gain and regain control of your classroom. Have a blessed one.